The Galactic Council chamber was never quiet. Hundreds of alien leaders sat inside the giant circular hall high above the capital world of Asterion Prime. Blue lights glowed across the silver walls while floating holograms moved through the air. Translators repeated thousands of voices in different languages at the same time. Some leaders argued about trade routes, others fought over military borders. A few demanded more protection for the outer colonies, but nobody listened to them anymore. The great core worlds only cared about themselves now. At the center of the chamber stood Supreme Chancellor Varex. The old leader slowly rubbed his forehead while another argument exploded across the room. The mining sector belongs to the Vekar. Union! That system was ours first! You are lying! Varex slammed his metal staff against the floor. The loud sound echoed through the chamber. Enough. The room slowly became quiet. Before anyone could speak again, red warning lights suddenly flashed across the walls. A loud alarm screamed through the chamber. Every leader froze. Emergency alarms almost never activated inside the capital system. One military officer ran toward the center platform, breathing heavily. Unknown object detected near orbit. The room filled with confused whispers. Varex frowned. Pirates? The officer shook his head quickly. No, Chancellor. It's much larger. Another officer looked up from her console. Fear slowly appeared on her face. Our scanners cannot identify it. The chamber became silent. That had never happened before. The Galactic Council controlled the most advanced scanner systems in known space. Every ship, every weapon, every engine type was stored inside their records. Nothing should have been unknown. Varex walked toward the giant hologram projector. Show it. The lights dimmed. A giant image appeared above the chamber. At first, many leaders thought it was a mistake. Some believed they were looking at a space station. Others thought it was a small moon. Then the hologram zoomed out. Gasps spread across the room. It was a ship. A massive black warship floating silently above the planet. The vessel was so large that entire fleets looked tiny beside it. Dark armor covered its surface like layers of steel mountains. Thousands of glowing lights lined the sides of the giant machine. Heavy weapon batteries rotated slowly across its body. The thing looked less like a ship and more like a moving fortress built for the end of worlds. Several council members stood from their seats in shock. That size is impossible. No species can build something like that. Who does it belong to? The officer swallowed nervously before answering. We found identification markings. The chamber waited silently. The officer looked directly at Chancellor Varex. It belongs to humanity. The room exploded into chaos. Humans? That cannot be true. Humans are traitors. They don't build warships. Varex stared at the hologram carefully. Humanity. That name had almost disappeared from galactic politics. 20 years ago, humans entered the Galactic Union as one of the weakest races in known space. Their colonies were poor, their fleets were small. Many alien races laughed at them openly. Humans were strange people, too emotional, too friendly, too willing to help weaker worlds for free. Most leaders believed humanity would never survive long in galactic politics. But then something strange happened. Humans slowly disappeared. Their trade ships stopped coming. Their ambassadors returned home. Entire human colonies vanished from public records. For 15 years, almost nobody saw human fleets anymore. Some believed humanity destroyed itself in civil war. Others thought pirates wiped them out. The Galactic Council stopped caring years ago. Until today. Varex narrowed his eyes. Open communication channels. Yes, Chancellor. The hologram suddenly changed. Words appeared across the screen. HTV Titan of Earth. Several council members looked afraid now. One old alien ambassador slowly stood from his chair. I warned all of you, he whispered. Nobody answered him. Because deep down, everyone remembered the rumors. Stories from deep space. Stories about human fleets fighting unknown enemies near the outer darkness. Most people ignored those stories. Now they were no longer laughing. Suddenly another alarm screamed through the chamber. An officer shouted in panic. Multiple jump signatures detected. The hologram expanded wider. Bright flashes filled space behind the giant human ship. Then more flashes appeared, and more. Entire fleets emerged from hyperspace. Huge carriers, heavy destroyers, attack cruisers, black armored warships spread across orbit like a steel storm. The room became completely silent. One council member whispered softly, "How many ships is that?" The officer's hands shook over the console. Over 3,000 confirmed. Fear spread through the chamber. No empire in the galaxy could move a fleet that large without months of preparation. But humanity arrived without warning, like ghosts appearing from darkness itself. Then every screen inside the chamber activated at once. Static covered the displays. A human woman appeared. She looked older than most military officers. Gray lines marked her face, but her eyes were calm and cold like ice. She wore a dark black uniform with silver markings. Behind her, human officers worked inside a giant command bridge filled with red warning lights. The woman spoke clearly. "Attention, Galactic Council." Her voice echoed through the chamber. "I am Grand Admiral Helena Ward of the Terran Defense Fleet." Nobody interrupted her. Even the loudest leaders stayed silent now. Chancellor Varax stepped forward carefully. "You have entered restricted military space with an unauthorized fleet." Admiral Ward nodded once. "Yes." The simple answer shocked the chamber. No apology, no fear, nothing. Varax frowned deeper. "Then explain the purpose of this invasion." For the first time, emotion appeared in the Admiral's eyes. Anger, but controlled anger. "You abandoned the outer colonies," she said quietly. Confused whispers spread again. Ward continued. "For 12 years, the Carthan swarm has destroyed frontier systems while this council argued about laws and politics. Several leaders shifted nervously. Everyone knew about the Carthans. Strange attacks happened near deep space routes for years. Entire colonies vanished without survivors. But the core worlds remained safe, so the council delayed military action again and again. Admiral Ward leaned slightly forward. Humanity did not delay. The hologram behind her suddenly changed. Destroyed planets appeared across the chamber. Burning cities, dead fleets, billions of refugees moving through ruined stations. Then came another image. Human warships fighting terrible alien creatures in deep space. Ships crashed into each other. Explosions lit entire moons on fire. The giant Titan itself fired a massive beam through hundreds of enemy vessels. Several council members looked horrified. "They fought alone," someone whispered. Ward's voice became colder. While this council held meetings, humanity bled in silence. The room stayed silent. Then warning alarms exploded again across the bridge behind her. Human officers shouted orders. A young officer turned toward the Admiral in panic. "Enemy fleet detected." Ward looked back toward the council one final time. Her eyes showed something terrifying now. Not fear, experience, like someone who had already survived hell. "The Carthans are here," she said quietly. The hologram changed once more. Thousands of red enemy signals appeared near the edge of the system. The entire chamber froze. One leader fell back into his chair. Another whispered prayers under his breath. The invasion fleet was enormous, far larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Panic exploded instantly. "We need evacuation. Activate planetary shields." "This is impossible." But Admiral Ward raised one hand, and somehow the room became quiet again. Then she spoke the words nobody would ever forget. "Do not panic." Behind her, the massive human war Titan slowly began charging its main weapon. And above Asterion Prime, the stars disappeared behind the arriving enemy swarm. The Galactic Council chamber fell into complete chaos. Leaders shouted over each other while warning alarms screamed across the walls. Military officers ran between hologram stations, trying to track the massive enemy fleet entering the system. Outside the giant windows of the chamber, thousands of ships moved through the darkness of space. The human fleet formed a defensive line around Asterion Prime. Nobody expected that. The humans could have escaped. Instead, they stayed. Supreme Chancellor Varex looked toward Admiral Helena Ward on the main screen. "You said the Carthans followed you here?" Ward answered calmly. "No." The old Chancellor frowned. "Then why are they here?" The human admiral stayed silent for a moment. When she finally spoke, her voice became heavy. "Because they finally found what they were searching for." Before Varex could ask another question, another officer shouted from the command floor. "Enemy fleet entering attack range." The hologram zoomed outward. For the first time, the council saw the Carthan swarm clearly. Fear spread instantly across the chamber. The enemy ships did not look mechanical, they looked alive. Massive black creatures moved through space like giant insects covered in armor. Some ships had glowing red eyes across their surface. Others opened giant mouths filled with burning energy. Even their movement felt wrong, like predators hunting in darkness. One council member whispered nervously, "What are those things?" Admiral Ward answered immediately, "Extinction." Silence filled the room. Then the human admiral touched a control panel beside her. The hologram changed again. This time, old recordings appeared. Human colony worlds, peaceful cities. Children, running through parks beneath blue skies. Farmers working on distant frontier planets. Then everything changed. Sirens screamed. Dark shapes fell from the sky. The Carthans attacked. Entire cities burned within minutes. Human defense ships exploded above planets while civilians tried desperately to escape. Council members watched in horror. One recording showed a human soldier carrying 2 injured children through a burning street while giant alien creatures chased survivors behind him. Another showed hundreds of civilian ships trying to flee through hyperspace gates while Carthan fleets destroyed them one by one. The chamber became deathly quiet. "For 15 years, Admiral Ward said slowly, "humanity fought this war alone." Varex stared at the images carefully. "Why did you never return to the council?" Ward's eyes hardened. "We did." The hologram changed again. Old council recordings appeared. Human ambassadors stood inside this same chamber years earlier. They begged for military support. They warned about the growing threat in deep space, but the council ignored them. Some leaders called the reports exaggerated. Others refused to waste resources protecting distant colonies. One alien senator even laughed openly during the meeting. "Humans panic too easily," he said. In the old recording, several council members lowered their heads in shame. Ward continued speaking. "After that meeting, humanity understood the truth." The human admiral stepped closer to the screen. "No one was coming to save us." Outside the chamber windows, massive human warships slowly moved into attack positions. The Titan of Earth stood at the center like a giant black mountain floating through space. Ward looked toward it proudly, so humanity saved itself. The hologram changed once more. Secret human shipyards appeared, hidden inside giant asteroids factories. The size of cities built enormous weapons day and night. Children trained in military academies. Entire planets transformed into fortress worlds. Human scientists created new engines, new armor, and terrible new weapons designed only for war. Humanity had disappeared from galactic space for one reason: preparation. "We stopped building luxury ships," Ward explained. "We stopped building pleasure worlds." The hologram showed giant factories covering entire moons. "We built fleets." Then another image appeared. The first human war Titan under construction. Even unfinished, the giant ship looked terrifying. Millions of workers moved across its surface while heavy weapons were lowered into place. Several council members looked shocked. "You built that thing in secret?" Ward nodded once. "We built 12. The room exploded again. 12? That's impossible. No civilization can afford that. Ward ignored them. For 15 years, humanity fought every day at the edge of known space. The hologram showed battle after battle. Human destroyers charging into impossible fights, planetary defense guns firing endlessly into enemy swarms, soldiers defending evacuation zones while civilians escaped behind them. Every image showed sacrifice. Every image showed humans refusing to retreat. Then came the worst. Recording a human colony world named Haven 7, the planet burned red beneath dark smoke. Millions of civilians waited desperately near evacuation ships while Carthan creatures flooded across the surface. A human fleet commander appeared on screen. His face was covered in blood. "Our engines are gone," he reported calmly. "We cannot escape." A younger officer looked terrified. "Sir, the civilians, they leave first." The recording ended with the human fleet turning back toward the enemy. None of those ships survived. The chamber remained silent for several seconds. Finally, Chancellor Varric spoke quietly. "How many humans died in this war?" Admiral Ward answered without emotion. 211 billion. Several leaders gasped loudly, even the largest. Galactic wars never reached numbers like that, yet humanity survived. Not only survived, they became stronger. A sudden explosion shook the human admiral's bridge. "Warning!" Sirens screamed behind her. An officer turned toward Ward. "Urgently! Enemy vanguard entering weapons range." Ward nodded calmly. "Begin Phase 1. Outside the chamber windows, the human fleet suddenly moved. Thousands of ships spread across, orbit in perfect formation. The Titan of Earth slowly rotated toward the incoming enemy. Swarm. Its massive weapons began glowing bright blue. The energy alone lit nearby ships like stars. One council member whispered nervously, "What is that thing charging?" Nobody answered. Then the first Carthan fleet attacked. Millions of enemy ships rushed forward like a living storm. The sight alone terrified the chamber. But the humans did not move. They waited closer, closer. Then Admiral Ward gave a single order: fire. The Titan's main weapon exploded with light. A giant beam tore across space itself. Entire sections of the enemy swarm vanished. Instantly, hundreds of Carthan ships disappeared. In one shot, the shockwave shook nearby fleets violently. Even the council chamber trembled. Nobody inside the room spoke. They simply stared in horror and disbelief. The Titan fired again and again. The battlefield became an ocean of explosions. But despite the destruction, the enemy kept coming. More and more Carthan ships flooded into the system endlessly. Then an officer suddenly shouted from the council command floor. "New enemy contacts detected." The hologram zoomed outward farther than before. The room froze. More Carthan fleets were arriving. Not thousands, not millions, billions. The entire edge of the hologram turned red. One council leader collapsed into his chair. Another whispered softly, "There's no way to stop that." But Admiral Ward looked directly at Chancellor Varric, and for the first time, fear appeared in her eyes too. Then she spoke quietly. "This is only the first wave." The first wave hit the defense line like a tidal wave of death. Space itself disappeared beneath endless enemy ships. The Galactic Council chamber shook violently as explosions flashed across the massive windows. Outside Asterion Prime, the human fleet fought against impossible numbers while terrified civilian ships tried to flee toward emergency jump gates. Every screen inside the chamber showed destruction. Burning cruisers, broken stations, fields of drifting wreckage. Yet the humans continued fighting without slowing down. Supreme Chancellor Varric stared silently at the battlefield hologram. He had witnessed wars before, but nothing like this. The Carthans did not fight like normal armies. They attacked like starving animals. Enemy ships slammed directly into defensive formations, tearing vessels apart with giant claws made from black metal and living bone. Smaller Carthan creatures burst from damaged ships and crawled across hulls like insects, cutting through armor to reach crews inside. Several alien admirals panicked immediately. "We cannot hold this line. Pull the defense fleets back. Protect the core stations." But Admiral Helena Ward's voice cut through the chaos. "No retreat." The chamber turned toward her screen again. Behind the Admiral, human officers moved calmly despite the battle raging around them. Warning alarms flashed red across the bridge of the Titan of Earth, but nobody looked afraid. Ward pointed toward the center of the hologram. "The Carthans want the planet intact," she explained. "That is our only advantage." Varric frowned. "Why would they want the capital world?" Ward looked at him carefully. "You already know the answer." The Chancellor stayed silent. That silence told her everything. Before Ward could continue, another explosion shook the Titan's bridge. A human officer shouted loudly, "Enemy breach on lower defense decks." "Seal the sector," Ward answered immediately. "No survivors detected." Several council members looked disturbed by how cold her voice sounded. But there was no time to think about it. The battle outside was getting worse. The first alien defense fleets had already broken formation. Ships from smaller species fled toward hyperspace gates, while human destroyers moved forward to fill the gaps. One council leader stood up angrily. "You humans brought this war to us." Ward slowly turned toward him. "No," she said quietly. "This war was always coming." Then the main hologram suddenly changed. A section of the human defense line collapsed under heavy attack. Hundreds of Carthan ships punched through the opening and rushed directly toward the planet. The chamber erupted in panic. They broke through. "Planetary shields won't hold. Deploy reserve fleets!" But before anyone could react further, dozens of human warships suddenly accelerated forward. The ships moved directly into the enemy swarm. Several council admirals looked confused. What are they doing? Then they understood. The human ships were not retreating. They were ramming the enemy. Massive explosions lit the darkness as human cruisers smashed into Carthan formations at full speed. Entire enemy groups disappeared in fire and metal. A shocked alien commander whispered, "They're sacrificing themselves." Ward's expression never changed. They volunteered. The room fell silent again. For the first time, the Galactic Council truly began understanding humanity. Humans were not fearless. Humans were simply willing to die if it protected others. Outside the chamber windows, the Titan of Earth moved slowly through the battlefield. The giant warship looked unstoppable. Enemy fire crashed against its armor constantly, but the massive vessel continued forward like an iron mountain. Then something changed. A strange signal suddenly appeared near the center of the enemy fleet. Human officers noticed it instantly. Ward's face darkened. "That's impossible." Varric stepped closer. "What is it?" The human admiral answered slowly, "A Hive commander." The hologram zoomed deeper into the Carthan fleet. At first, nobody understood what they were seeing. Then the massive shape emerged from darkness. The thing was enormous. A living creature larger than entire cities floated behind the enemy lines. Thick armored tentacles moved slowly through space while giant glowing eyes opened across its surface. It looked less like a ship, and more like a nightmare born in deep space. Even the Carthan fleets moved around it carefully. One council member whispered in horror, "That thing is alive." Ward nodded once. "It controls the swarm." The creature suddenly released a low-energy pulse across space. Immediately, the enemy fleets changed formation. Their attacks became faster, smarter, more organized. Human defense ships began losing ground rapidly. A young officer turned toward Ward in panic. "Enemy pressure increasing across all sectors." Another shouted, "2 carriers destroyed." Defense line collapsing. For the first time since arriving, Admiral Ward looked truly worried. The Hive commander was not supposed to be here yet. Human intelligence believed it remained far beyond the outer systems. If it reached the capital planet, everything would end. Then another terrible message arrived. Civilian evacuation routes compromised. The hologram showed thousands of refugee ships trapped near the jump gates while Carthan fighters swarmed around them. Families, children, entire alien populations trying desperately to escape. The council chamber became silent once more. Most leaders looked helpless. Some even looked ashamed. Humanity had protected these worlds for years while the council argued endlessly. And now the humans were dying again to protect strangers. Ward stared at the refugee ships for several long seconds. Then she gave an order. "Move the Titan toward the evacuation corridor." Several human officers looked shocked. "Ma'am, that will expose the flagship." Ward did not hesitate. "Do it." Outside, the giant human war Titan slowly changed direction. The massive ship moved directly between the civilians and the enemy swarm. Instantly, thousands of Carthan ships attacked it from every side. Explosions covered the Titan like burning storms. Huge sections of armor cracked apart, yet the ship continued moving forward. Then the Titan activated something new. Massive shield walls exploded outward from its hull, covering the evacuation corridor in glowing blue light. Enemy attacks slammed into the shields endlessly, while refugee ships escaped behind the giant human warship. The council chamber watched silently. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. One alien senator whispered softly, "They're protecting us." Another lowered his head in shame. "We abandoned them first." Then suddenly, every alarm inside the chamber screamed at once. An officer looked up from the scanner station with terror in his eyes. Unknown object entering the system. The hologram zoomed outward again. At the edge of space, something gigantic appeared. Larger than the Titan. Larger than the Hive commander. A dark shape slowly emerged from hyperspace like a moving continent. Even the Carthan fleet stopped attacking for a moment. The chamber froze completely. No one spoke. No one breathed. Then Admiral Ward whispered words that filled the entire room with fear. The Carthan Emperor. The arrival of the Carthan Emperor changed everything. Even the battlefield became silent for a few seconds. Human ships stopped firing. Alien fleets froze in fear. Across the darkness of space, the giant creature slowly moved forward like a living planet. Its body was covered in black armor thicker than mountain ranges. Massive glowing eyes opened across its surface one after another, staring toward Asterion Prime. Every time the creature moved, strange energy waves shook nearby ships, several smaller. Carthan vessels were crushed accidentally beneath its enormous body. The thing did not care. It only moved toward the capital world. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, panic exploded again. That thing is bigger than the Titan. We cannot fight that. Evacuate the planet immediately. Supreme Chancellor Varric stood completely still while the hologram reflected in his tired eyes. Admiral Helena, Ward looked directly at him through the main screen. Now her voice carried anger again. How long were you planning to hide it? Several council members looked confused. But Varric slowly lowered his head. The silence inside the chamber became heavy. One alien senator looked toward him carefully. Chancellor, what is she talking about? Varric closed his eyes for a moment, then he spoke quietly. The Carthans are not attacking the planet. Ward nodded coldly. They're attacking what's beneath it. Fear spread across the chamber. Several leaders stood from their seats. What beneath it? What secret? Varric finally looked toward the council, and for the first time in many years, the old leader looked ashamed. 10,000 years ago, he said slowly, the founders of the Galactic Council discovered something buried beneath Asterion Prime. The room became silent. A machine, the hologram, suddenly changed. Deep underground tunnels appeared beneath the capital city. Giant ancient structures stretched through the planet's core like metallic roots. Massive symbols glowed across. Black walls older than recorded history. Even the humans inside the chamber became quiet. Ward already knew part of the truth, but not all of it. Varric continued. The machine was left behind by a civilization far older than any species alive today. One council member whispered nervously. The ancients. Varric nodded once. They called it the Heart of Silence. Nobody spoke. The giant underground structure filled the hologram like a sleeping god buried beneath the planet. One scientist stepped forward shakily. What does it do? Varric answered with one terrible sentence. We don't fully know. The chamber exploded with angry shouting. You hid this from us? You endangered the entire galaxy. Because of a machine? Ward's eyes narrowed dangerously. How many people died because you kept this secret? Varric could not answer. That answer alone told everyone. Enough humanity had fought and bled for 15 years without knowing the real reason behind the Carthan invasion. The enemy was never hunting planets. They were searching for the ancient machine hidden beneath the capital. World. Suddenly the chamber shook violently. Massive explosion flashed outside the windows. The Carthan Emperor had moved closer. Its enormous body now blocked half the stars above the planet. Human fleets attacked it constantly, but their weapons barely slowed it down. The creature released a deep energy pulse across space. Several alien ships instantly lost power and crashed into each other. An officer shouted in, "Panic! Planetary shields weakening!" Another yelled. The outer defense line collapsed. The battle was getting worse every second. Then another transmission appeared from the Titan of Earth. A human officer spoke urgently. Admiral, enemy boarding creatures have entered lower reactor sectors. Ward nodded calmly. Contain them. Ma'am, there are too many. Then slow them down. The transmission ended. Several council members looked disturbed again. Human officers spoke about death like people, discussing weather. But Ward no longer had time for diplomacy. The Heart of Silence must be moved, she said firmly. Varric looked shocked. That is impossible. Then destroy it. The entire chamber froze. Several leaders shouted, "Instantly, you can't. We don't know what will happen. Ward stepped closer to the screen. And if the Carthans reach it? Nobody answered, because everyone already knew the truth. The galaxy would end. Outside the chamber windows, the Titan suddenly fired its main cannon again. A giant beam tore through space and slammed directly into the Carthan Emperor. For the first time, the massive creature reacted. A terrible scream echoed across nearby communications systems. The sound was so deep and unnatural that several officers covered their ears in pain. The blast tore away part of the creature's outer armor. Underneath was living flesh glowing red with energy. Council member whispered, "It can be hurt." But the victory lasted only seconds. The Carthan Emperor opened hundreds of glowing eyes across its surface. Then it attacked. Massive energy beams erupted from the creature and slammed into the human fleet. Entire destroyers vanished. Instantly, heavy cruisers broke apart like paper. Even the Titan shields flickered violently. Warning. Sirens screamed across Ward's bridge. Shield. Failure on multiple sectors. Main cannon overheating. Enemy swarms approaching the hull. Still, the Admiral remained calm. She studied the battlefield carefully. Then she noticed something strange. The Carthan Emperor was ignoring most human ships. It moved only toward one location, the capital city directly above the heart of silence. Ward's expression hardened. It knows exactly where the machine is. Varex looked horrified. That's impossible. The chamber was hidden for thousands of years. Ward turned toward him slowly. "No," she said quietly. It was waiting. Before anyone could answer, another alarm exploded through the chamber. This one came from the planet itself. A frightened officer shouted, "Unknown life forms detected inside the lower city levels." The hologram switched immediately. People across the capital city were running through crowded streets while emergency sirens screamed overhead. Then the cameras captured them Carthan creatures, smaller than the ship's fast, sharp black limbs, glowing red eyes. They crawled through underground tunnels and subway systems, attacking civilians everywhere. The invasion had already reached the planet. Panic spread instantly. "They're inside the city." "How did they bypass the shields?" Ward answered immediately. "Boarding spores." The human admiral looked toward her officers. "Deploy ground teams now." "Yes, ma'am." The transmission ended. Then another screen activated. Automatically, human dropships screamed through the skies of Asterion Prime while soldiers prepared for combat inside. Men and women in heavy black armor checked weapons calmly while explosions lit the clouds. Outside, one young soldier looked nervous. Another soldier beside him smiled slightly. "First battle?" The younger man nodded. "Yeah." The older soldier loaded his rifle. "Stay close to the Titans." The younger soldier frowned. "The Titans?" Then the rear doors of the dropship slowly opened, and something enormous stepped forward from the darkness behind them. A giant human war machine nearly 3 stories tall. Its metal eyes glowed blue, heavy. Weapons rotated across its massive arms. The machine walked toward the open doors as alarms screamed across the city below. Inside the council chamber, silence returned once more. One alien leader whispered in fear, "How many weapons did humanity build in secret?" But nobody answered because down below on the burning planet, the real war was only beginning. Fire covered the skies of Asterion Prime. Across the massive capital city, explosions lit the night while civilians ran through crowded streets in panic. Emergency sirens echoed between giant towers as human dropships rushed toward battle zones across the planet. The Carthan invasion had begun. Inside one of the descending dropships, Sergeant Daniel Reyes tightened his grip around his rifle while the ship shook violently. Around him, human soldiers sat quietly in heavy black armor. Nobody spoke much. They had all seen worlds die before. A red warning light flashed above the rear door. 30 seconds, the pilot shouted. Reyes looked toward the massive war machine standing beside the soldiers. The giant combat mech almost touched the ceiling of the ship. Thick armor covered its body while heavy plasma cannons rested along both arms. Painted across the machine's chest were the words, "Titan Unit 14. The mech pilot's voice came through the speakers calmly. "I'll clear the landing zone. Stay behind me." Several younger soldiers looked nervous. Reyes noticed it immediately. Most of them had never fought Carthans before. That usually changed fast. The dropship suddenly shook harder. Something slammed against the outside hull. Then came scratching sounds. Everyone froze. A soldier whispered, "They're on the ship." The lights suddenly died. Darkness filled the troop bay. Only the red emergency lights remained. Then screaming came from the cockpit. The pilot's voice vanished instantly. "Impact!" Reyes shouted. The dropship crashed through the side of a skyscraper. Metal screamed apart. The entire ship rolled across the ground before stopping violently inside a burning street. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then the rear door exploded inward. Carthan creatures rushed inside immediately. Fast, black, covered in blades and teeth. Human soldiers opened fire at once. The inside of the ship became chaos. Gunfire flashed through smoke while creatures leaped across walls and ceilings. One young soldier froze in fear as a Carthan charged him. Before the creature reached him, boom! The Titan mech fired one massive shot. The entire monster exploded apart instantly. The giant war machine stepped out of the burning dropship and into the ruined street. Reyes followed with the surviving soldiers behind him. The city looked like hell. Buildings burned across the skyline. Civilian vehicles crashed through crowded roads. Carthan creatures flooded through subway tunnels and shattered streets while emergency broadcasts played endlessly overhead. But then Reyes noticed something strange. The creatures were not attacking randomly. They were all moving toward the same place. The central government district. Toward the underground chamber hiding the heart of silence. Far above the planet, the battle in space continued growing worse. The Titan of Earth fired constantly into the enemy swarm while human fleets struggled to hold orbit. Inside the massive flagship, Admiral Helena Ward stood silently on the bridge while alarms screamed around her. "Report," she ordered. A tired officer answered immediately. 42% fleet losses. Another officer looked pale. Outer defense line destroyed. Civilian evacuation? Still in progress. Ward looked toward the main screen. The Carthan Emperor continued moving slowly toward the planet like a god of destruction. Every human attack slowed it, but nothing stopped it. Then a new signal appeared on the scanners. An officer turned quickly toward the Admiral. "Enemy breach detected inside planetary core tunnels." Ward's expression darkened. "They reached the lower chambers already?" "Yes, ma'am." The room became silent. They were running out of time. Back inside the Galactic Council chamber, Supreme Chancellor Verex watched the battle unfold with horror. Entire fleets burned outside his world. Billions were dying because of secrets buried beneath his planet. One council member suddenly pointed toward the hologram. "The humans are losing." Nobody argued. Even the Titan of Earth was damaged now. Huge sections of armor burned across its surface. Several weapon systems had already gone dark. Yet the giant ship continued fighting. Verex looked toward Admiral Ward's screen. "You cannot win this battle," Ward answered calmly. "I know," the old chancellor frowned. "Then why stay?" For the first time since the war began, the human admiral looked tired. "Not afraid, just tired. Because if we leave," she said quietly, "everyone dies." The chamber fell silent again. Then another explosion shook the Titan's bridge. A nearby human carrier suddenly split apart outside the windows. Thousands of escape pods scattered into space while Carthan ships tore through the wreckage. Ward closed her eyes briefly. Then she spoke again. "Prepare final protocol." Several officers froze. One whispered nervously, "Ma'am." Ward looked directly ahead. "That is an order." Across the bridge, human officers slowly returned to work. Nobody argued further. The Galactic Council leaders looked confused. "What is final protocol?" one senator asked. No human answered. Deep beneath the capital city, Sergeant Reyes and his squad fought through underground tunnels toward the Heart of Silence chamber. Bodies covered the corridors. Human soldiers, alien guards, Carthan creatures. The deeper they moved underground, the stranger the walls became. Ancient black metal stretched across enormous tunnels filled with glowing symbols older than recorded history. One soldier looked around nervously. "This place doesn't feel right," he was correct. The air itself felt heavy, like the ancient machine buried below was alive somehow. Suddenly, the entire tunnel shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then came a sound none of them expected. A heartbeat, slow, massive, ancient. Boom, boom, boom. The soldiers stopped moving. Reyes looked toward the darkness ahead. "Tell me you all heard that." Before anyone answered, screaming echoed through the tunnels. Human defenders further ahead opened fire desperately. Then came silence. Something enormous was moving below. Back in orbit, the battle reached its breaking point. The Carthan Emperor finally reached firing range of the planet. Its giant eyes began glowing brighter and brighter. An officer shouted in terror. Energy levels rising. Ward immediately understood. It was preparing to destroy the surface defenses completely. Once that happened, nothing would stop the enemy from reaching the heart of silence. The Admiral stared silently at the burning battlefield outside. Then she made her decision. All fleets, she said calmly across every communication channel, fall back from the Emperor. Several captains looked shocked. You're ordering retreat? Ward shook her head slowly. No. She looked toward the massive forward windows of the Titan of Earth. Only the Titan stays. Silence covered the bridge. Every officer understood immediately. The flagship was about to fight alone. Ward activated a fleet-wide transmission. Across human ships everywhere, soldiers and pilots listened carefully while battle raged around them. Her voice remained calm. For 15 years, humanity stood between the darkness and innocent worlds. The Titan's engines slowly grew brighter. We do not stop now. The giant warship began accelerating directly toward the Carthan Emperor, straight into the center of the enemy swarm. One officer whispered softly, "She's going to ram it." Outside the burning planet, the human war titan charged forward alone against an army large enough to consume galaxies. And deep beneath Asterion Prime, the ancient machine suddenly began to wake up. The heart of silence awakened beneath Asterion Prime. Deep underground, the ancient machine pulsed like a living star buried inside the planet. Black metal walls glowed brighter with every heartbeat, while strange energy waves moved through the tunnels. Sergeant Daniel Reyes and the surviving soldiers stopped in fear. Boom, boom, boom. The sound shook the entire underground complex. One young soldier whispered nervously, "What is this thing?" Nobody answered, because ahead of them the darkness was moving. Heavy footsteps echoed through the ancient tunnels. Then the shadows opened. The Carthan Hive commander emerged slowly into the glowing chamber. The creature was enormous. Its body scraped against the walls as dozens of glowing red eyes opened across its black armored skin. Long claws dragged across the metal floor while smaller Carthan creatures crawled around it, like insects protecting their queen. Several soldiers stepped backward instinctively. Reyes raised his rifle. "Open fire!" Human weapons exploded through the tunnels. Plasma rounds slammed into the giant creature while Titan Unit 14 fired heavy cannon blasts that shook the chamber violently. The Hive commander screamed. The sound felt wrong. Not like an animal, like millions of voices crying together. But the creature kept moving. Its armor healed almost instantly after every hit. Then it attacked. One massive claw smashed through the tunnel wall and crushed 2 soldiers instantly. Smaller creatures rushed forward through the smoke, while human defenders fought desperately at close range. Titan Unit 14 stepped between the enemy and the soldiers. The giant mech grabbed one Carthan creature and tore it apart before firing missiles directly into the Hive commander's chest. The explosion lit the chamber white. For a moment, everyone thought it worked. Then the smoke cleared. The creature was still alive. And now it was angry. Far above the planet, the Titan of Earth charged directly into the enemy swarm. The giant warship burned from hundreds of impacts while human escort ships exploded around it one by one. Still, the Titan moved forward. Inside the flagship bridge, Admiral Helena Ward stood calmly while warning alarms screamed endlessly around her. Forward shields collapsing. Main reactor overheating. Enemy swarms breaching outer hull. Ward ignored all of it. Her eyes remained fixed on the massive shape ahead. The Carthan Emperor. The creature filled space itself like a living nightmare. Its glowing eyes turned toward the approaching human warship. Then it attacked. Massive energy beams slammed into the Titan of Earth. Entire sections of armor exploded apart instantly. Human officers were thrown across the bridge as the ship shook violently. An officer struggled back to his station. "Direct hit across sectors 9 through 14. Casualties rising." Another shouted desperately, "Engines failing." Ward slowly gripped the command rail tighter. "How close are we?" 8,000 kilometers. Not close enough. The Admiral looked toward the stars outside. Then she activated every communication channel across the battlefield. Her voice spread across all human ships. All alien survivors. All civilians escaping the system. For years, she said quietly, the galaxy believed humanity was weak. The Titan fired its remaining weapons into the enemy swarm. Explosions covered space like burning stars. But strength was never about power. Another direct hit slammed into the ship. The bridge lights failed briefly. Smoke filled the command deck. Still Ward continued speaking. It is about standing when everyone else falls. Across the battlefield, alien crews listened silently while the giant human warship pushed deeper into impossible odds. Then suddenly, the heart of silence activated fully. A giant pulse erupted from beneath Asterion Prime. Every ship in orbit shook violently. Even the Carthan Emperor paused. Deep underground, Reyes watched in shock as ancient symbols across the chamber exploded with white light. The machine was waking up completely now. A strange voice echoed through the tunnels. Not spoken, felt, ancient, cold. Waiting complete. The soldiers froze. Even the Carthan stopped moving. Then the Hive commander screamed in panic for the first time. It rushed directly toward the machine. Reyes immediately understood. It's afraid of it. Titan Unit 14 charged forward instantly, blocking the creature's path. The giant mech slammed into the Hive commander, while human soldiers opened fire from every direction. The chamber became chaos. Metal. Fire. Screaming. Then the mech pilot's voice came calmly through squad communications. I'll hold it here. Reyes looked up. Pilot, fall back. The answer came immediately. No time. Titan Unit 14 wrapped both massive arms around the screaming Hive commander. Then the mech activated its reactor overload. The pilot spoke one final sentence. Protect the future. A blinding explosion consumed the entire tunnel. Back in orbit, Admiral Ward received the signal instantly. The heart of silence was active. Now came the final choice. A human officer looked toward her with fear. Ma'am, if we trigger the machine at full power? Ward nodded slowly. The Titan won't survive. Silence filled the bridge. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then one young officer quietly smiled. We knew that already. Several others laughed softly despite the burning ship around them. Humanity had been fighting this war for 15 years. Most of them never expected to see peace again. Ward looked proudly at her crew. Then she gave the final order. Transmit evacuation confirmation. It's done, ma'am. How many civilians escaped? The officer checked the numbers. Almost 800 million. Ward closed her eyes briefly. Good, that was enough. Then she faced the Carthan Emperor one final time. The giant enemy creature opened its glowing eyes wide as the Titan accelerated directly toward it. The human warship was burning apart now, but it did not slow down. Across the galaxy, millions watched the final moments live. Alien worlds, refugee ships, broken fleets. Everyone saw humanity's last stand. Ward placed one hand on the command console. Activate the heart of silence. Deep beneath the planet, the ancient machine answered. A wave of white energy exploded outward across the system. The stars themselves seemed to disappear. The Carthan swarm froze instantly. Then one by one, enemy ships began collapsing into dust. The Hive commander disintegrated underground. The giant swarms above the planet shattered apart. Even the Carthan Emperor screamed as its enormous body broke apart beneath the light. The war was over, but the Titan of Earth remained directly beside the blast center. Inside the bridge, officers held their stations quietly while white light consumed the ship around them. Admiral Ward looked toward the peaceful stars one final time. Humanity survived. That was enough. Then the Titan vanished. Weeks later, the galaxy slowly began rebuilding. The old Galactic Council was gone forever. In its place, a new alliance formed between surviving worlds, and above Asterion Prime, workers built a giant memorial in orbit, a black statue of the human war titan. Under it were written simple words every species would remember forever. When the galaxy ran, humanity stood, but far beyond known space, deep inside the endless darkness. Unknown signals quietly awakened. Something had heard humanity's war cry, and it was coming closer.